Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Nice to see you. So, this is What's Up with the Onyx Path, where we look at everything that's not the world of darkness with the Onyx Path, because we have other panels for that. And we already did one of them, and they were great. So let's move into this one, which is actually the stuff that Onyx Path is about. So, first thing, I'm Rich Thomas, CEO and Creative Director of Onyx Path. Very brief history for a few of you who might not know about this. Onyx Path was founded 2.5 years ago when I left CCP, which was the company that merged with White Wolf, which I helped create back in 1981. So, left there because we had, while working for CCP, and Eddy Webb here and I, that guy, had worked on Vampire 20th Anniversary Edition because we thought it's 20 years, it'd be really cool if we did something really nice and awesome while we were working on computer games. Discovered that actually I really enjoyed art directing and laying out and doing the work for V20, and it felt right. And some of the stuff that we were doing for computer games was difficult and tedious and involved things like Scrum and morning stand-ups. So you have a huge project.
There's a few seats up here, you guys.
Yep, making an MMO was like making a movie, and it was just too much. So you can make
some here too.
Make RPGs and amazing books and PDFs and be in that situation. So what I did was made a deal with CCP to license the classic World of Darkness, New World of Darkness, and Exalted. And so we are the official licensed tabletop creators for those games. We have to go through the approval process with CCP for those, which Monsieur Eddy Webb has been our agent in that particular field, and is now officially a consultant for CCP, and also, of course, our friend and developer of the classic World of Darkness and other stuff. At the same time we were getting that going, revitalizing the old White Wolf properties, there were some other things that White Wolf had done over the years that I had been involved with, such as Scion and the Trinity Continuum, as we're calling it now, and also Starlands, which was our Die 20 entry back when Die 20 made everything crazy and nuts. And CCP didn't seem to want to own them forever, and I made them an offer and bought those properties for Onyx Path.
An offer they couldn't refuse.
Made them an offer they couldn't. Yeah, Cheney went in there with a chainsaw.
Right. Horse head.
Yeah. So what we're looking at now is the idea that not only does Onyx Path do the classic World of Darkness, New World of Darkness, and Exalted on the license, but also these other properties. We're going to be doing second editions of Trinity Continuum and Scion. And if you're down at our booth, we have an example of a Pathfinder-based Scarlands adventure that we will probably, if not up on as PDF, up on drive-through soon. A couple hours. Yeah, maybe in a couple hours even. And then the third really possible thing that I'm hoping to do with Onyx Path is to create new games as well. It's a sort of a process. There's not a lot of us. Just kidded around with the previous thing that, woo, we've tripled our size because we've got 3 employees now full time. And everyone else, the creative team that you see right here, are all freelance creators. And so when Justin Achille works on Vampire for me, it's as a freelance creator. And he has his full-time job doing computer game design for Red Store in North Carolina. So it's a different situation. We're not White Wolf Reborn. Let me put the rest of this. We're not in any way owned by CCP. This is not some Dodge. They created a fake company. This is a real one. You'd be surprised the conspiracy theories you hear about on our forums.
I'm not surprised.
You're not surprised. I'm not either, but I get the benefit of the doubt in here.
Right, fair enough.
Don't you secretly
There's a lot
own
more
by
innocent
studios?
people here in the audience.
Yes, I've heard that one.
People. And so what we're going to talk about today is some of the upcoming stuff that we're working on, which of course, we went to the trouble of making a two-sided poster, so we're serious. And the brochure, is people still missing brochures? Anybody,
I've got 3 left. So come on up. All right.
I am up.
And just very briefly, business model-wise, that's in the brochure, but I'll just touch on it because I don't want to go too far down that. Well, we can talk about cool projects. Most of our business is through drive-through RPG, creating PDF and other e-format projects, and print-on-demand books, which, if you've never tried a print-on-demand book from drive-through RPG, it's as easy as using Amazon, and it basically, print-on-demand means they print one book for you when you order it, their vendor does, and it gets shipped out to you, and it's boom, 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 boom. They're really nice quality. They're not, they're not traditionally printed quality, but they're getting.
They don't look like this.
Yeah.
They look
like this.
That. They look closer to that. So, and then we have, of course, have our Kickstarters, which I'm sure somebody in the audience would like to talk about the Exalted one. And at least I stood up to it.
That's not my problem.
And that was an entirely new thing that we never expected to start with, and really fell into it the first couple of them. And I think we're getting a lot better at doing them. But what I really enjoy about it is the immediacy of having an audience and being able to talk to people about this really cool thing we want to do, and how can you help us do this thing. And even with the Kickstarters we do now, where you can actually help us change what's going to go into the project. What do you want to see if enough people are excited about it? We could never have done that back in the day with White Wolf. There was not the immediacy. We would publish a book. It would go into the traditional channels. We'd hear it hit because I think the checks started to come to Steve Wick, and he happy. And
we all want to make Steve happy.
We all want to make Steve happy because he's 6.5 feet tall and can break your back. So
Yes.
And then maybe we get a letter, paper, letter, mailed to us. Why did you put this in there? I have a question about that. That's how far back we're talking. And now we put something out. We do the open dev process, as we call it, which is the files as they're being worked on. We put that up there. People have a chance to tell us what they think. Sometimes really great ideas are exchanged and the things are improved greatly. Sometimes the developer says, I don't even want to go that way. But it's open, and it's really nice to be able to have that instantaneous feedback. And the thing goes up on PDF, and somebody says, I noticed on page 42 that you forgot a paragraph. Bam. We can get in there, we can fix it. So it's a very different thing now than it was back in the day, and it's great for the creative teams in particular, because you're really looking at an immediacy and again, like more of a partnership with everyone who's going to then take the thing and play it and run with it and read it. And I think that's something unique for what we're doing in this business. And it always was that way, because what we do is really, we create a game or a game book. That's the start. Everything that everybody does around the table, that's actually the real meaning behind that, or the important part of that. Because you're telling that story. That story is something we could never have anticipated. So enough of the preamble, which is preambling on. Our good friend, Mr. Ian Watson, who is not only our community manager, but also the, as we call him, Uber developer of the Trinity Continuum, keeping an eye on the multiple projects that will eventually come out of that. So before I hand up, I don't know if you have something you'd like to say.
Hi.
He's from Canada. He's really, really polite. Already introduced you to Eddy Webb, so let's just skip him. And you've seen him enough. I put his picture up like once every 6 months on the blog.
Horribly disfigured, I might add, usually.
The deer in the headlights photo.
It's the hair. It's the hair. The greatest hair in roleplay. Dave Brookshaw, right there. He is the Amazing Awakening developer, but Dave is also involved with just about every one of our projects. And he'll have some interesting things to talk about in terms of. If you don't, you should.
I'm probably the least involved member of the team designing the system for Scion and Trinity.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, Neil,
You're the best.
I'll consider that when we see. Well, how much does he get? Neil, the full name? Do you need is that what you prefer?
Neil Raymond Price, yes.
Neil Raymond Price, who is also working on the system that we've been trying to develop for Trinity and Scion. It's basically an evolution of the dice pool system that we're all familiar with playing White Wolf games. Matt McElroy, not only our guiding light over Drive-Thru RPG, but I'm just giving you a comment here. Matt is
That's all I got.
Matt has also been spearheading a lot of our fiction efforts, and in particular, he has gotten all but a couple of the fiction stories for the Exalted anthology that was part of the Kickstarter.
And the Exalted comic book is already out and
Right.
at the Onyx Pen booth.
No, it's sold out.
They're sold out?
Yeah.
So you can get it at Drive-Thru. The Exalted anthology is just about done with its first draft phase. We're waiting on one story, and then Matt Forbeck and Jess Hartley have turned in outlines for both of their Exalted novels. And we're working on the Exalted retrospective as well.
Awesome. And this beautiful gentleman over here, this young gentleman over here, John Sneed, who, if any of you were Trinity fans back in the day, you definitely know his name. John was very much one of the visionaries behind Trinity, and so lucky to have him back for Trinity as a developer of Aeon.
Yes. Now it's actually Trinity Universe Aeon.
Continuum.
We can call it Aeon and not get sued.
No lawyer has proven that. But I believe it in my heart.
Stickers come off.
Yeah.
I didn't actually that was pre-sticker.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I got
that's what
100%
mine is too. No, I love it. I mean, I have the other one, but that one's like.
Yeah, if any of you aren't familiar with it, we published a science fiction game called Aeon 142 years ago. And we were fine with that up until the point that we went to get approval for its either trademark or copyright. I always get them confused.
Trademark.
And someone contested it on the very last day where we could have had it. That someone was Viacom, who's kind of a huge media conglomerate that was, I think at the time, owned HBO, or HBO was part of MTV.
MTV.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had a little bitty, I consider it a little bitty TV show called Aeon Flux, and they thought it would be a confusion in the marketplace for us to have a thing called Aeon, and then to have a thing called Aeon Flux. Our game didn't have anything to do with killer women running around.
But it will.
Well, it will now. That'll show the water.
Give us time.
So they threatened a few things, and then we were stuck with the always fun choice of printing up a whole bunch of stickers with the new name that we had to come up with in like 4 hours, and stickering each one of our books over the Aeon logo with a new logo called Trinity. Now, there's plenty of justifiable reasons for calling it that. It's a cool name for what we were doing with the whole line, but it wasn't our Aeon. So that if you see books, there will be both the original Aeon, and people are very proud to say, "I never stickered it," and others that have the Trinity sticker. So that's what that is all about. One of the things that happens with these projects, because they have this enormous backstory, is that as you try to rejuvenate them a little bit, people go, "What? What are you talking about? Thank you." And also, I will tend to stand here, and my voice will get lower, and people in the back won't be able to hear it. So I have secret people in the back to let me know if they can't hear me. Okay, so that's our crew who are currently here. Let's start a little bit with. Actually, you know what? Do we even want to? The brochure is upcoming releases. It's by season, because some people were upset that we were missing the months we said we have things out. And mostly in here, what you're going to see is the Exalted release schedule, which is remarkably similar to the previous year that we put this out. So
So
it doesn't
back to
actually
the
say what's happening with Scion, what's happening with Trinity, what's happening with Scarlands, what's happening with Cavaliers of Mars, what's happening with other new projects. So I'm not going to really go into much detail on that. If you want more information about Exalted, please come down to our booth in terms of the releases. But I figure that after at least a year's worth of having these descriptions in the public domain and everybody being able to read them, most people probably already caught up on that. And they're in there to show that, yes, indeed, we are still committed to delivering them. It is not going to disappear.
Eventually.
Once Exalted 3 is done.
Yes.
So, and in the Q&A, we'll be glad to talk about Exalted. But let's jump into what's happening with Trinity and Scion, because they're tied together. And anybody who's been reading the updates that I put out every week knows that we want to have a system. Why do we want to have a new system? What's wrong with the old system? Well, the old system as applied to Trinity, it wasn't, I wouldn't say that things were all too bad. Well, until Aberrant came along.
Outroots!
And suddenly, how do you have a system that can scale from man in the street to Divis Mom, who not only has arms but godlike abilities? So, that had to be fixed.
I was going to
And,
say it.
yeah, and if anything that led us to know that it had to be fixed, we then said, well, we should probably use the same system for Scion, because it could kind of be like maybe an Onyx Path sort of house system. We're not tied to systems, but it'd be cool if somebody we want to come up with a game and we already have a system to use it. People will have comfort and be able to play it and not have to think too much, which is my goal for any system. So, Scion. Well, first of all, of course, we knew that we had to get throwing rules in there from the beginning. But beyond that, Scion has the exact same problem as ever, which is that it starts to break down. The more powerful you get, it just doesn't scale anymore. So that's really the impetus for wanting to do a new system. And from that, we look at what else we can do beyond that. And Joe Carricker, who could not be here today, Joe is in, I won't say Seattle, but he's in Portland. He's on the West Coast, up higher than California. And Joe is a developer
Canada?
for Scion.
There's a lot of
And he and
Canada.
Ian talked a fair bit with me about what system we wanted to do to create. And Joe's team kind of were running with some ideas already. So we said, okay, let's see what we can come up with that. It's taken a long time because it's difficult to pull that sort of stuff together when, in Joe's case, you have chronic back problems and can't get up. So it's been a little bit slower than we wanted it to happen. But we're getting to the point now we're sitting down and going through some of the last stages of how the system can work. And part of it is that Joe wants to add more ability at some point while you're playing to engage on the storytelling aspect of it. He's concerned about Scion because it's a game of legends and myths, and those sorts of things should be kind of tied into the system. In Trinity's case, there's some logic to that as well. So I will, rather than continue to babble on, let Ian and Dave and Neil talk a little bit about where things are with the system and with those two games as a whole.
Well, they know more about the system than I
Yeah, I
will,
can
so.
see everyone looking at me. So.
Yeah.
All right. If you look at the previous iterations of the storytelling system and you look at their kind of origins, the greatest origin way back in 1991, it's fundamentally very much a horror game. And going on from then, it's always kind of remained in that sort of mode of a horror game where everything's kind of oppressing you. But Trinity and Scion both have very different needs. And even if you're using, the same basic mechanic, the same basic die resolution mechanic, they're both at their core action games. They're both action movies. Scion is a dynamic game about being a living legend in a world of myth. And Trinity is about being a hero in an optimistic world where you can make a difference from the world backsliding into chaos. And the three Trinity lines, similarly, are about playing an awesome space psychic, a superhero, and a two-fisted pulp adventurer. So, horror doesn't really work for those I mean, it can, and it has a place, but it's not the fundamental core of the game. So very much what we wanted to do is we wanted to also bring in a lot of the innovations that we've seen amongst games derived from storyteller and storytelling over the years, and kind of fold them back into a core system from day one that's focused around action and dynamism rather than
Repression and death and fear.
Exactly.
Rather than a murder simulator.
Yes.
Yes.
The people have described the World of Darkness system as a murder simulator because combat can be very brutal if you run it by the book. There's ways to mitigate that, and a lot of very good supplements have had ways to make it more cinematic. But rather than adding those in as a patch, we have built the entire system around that core of cinematic action.
Yeah, it's far more important for us that you tell a cool story. I mean, you're most likely going to survive at the end of it. But, I mean, just because that's how stories work, right? You don't see a movie and the protagonist dies halfway through, right? So, for most. Like you watch Leverage, even though the characters are in peril and you're excited because they're in peril, you expect that by the end of the episode they're still all going to be around.
Yeah. One of the things we were starting to talk about very early on in the system is that Storyteller has a kind of history and a legacy of being very easy to interact with, and there not being any real divide between player and character. Everything that the character is fundamentally represented on that sheet, and we wanted to also keep with that, but also introduce a sort of way for the player to interact with the GM as well on a sort of meta level. So we were just discussing earlier, there's a sort of bargaining, almost like a bargaining mechanic where the storyteller will offer you extra complications in the story in turn for your character to do that. And we've seen something like that on the God Machine Chronicles. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it's something along those lines, but very different and inside the core dice mechanic. Rather than the experience mechanic. Can we talk about Open Dev at all? Can we just throw that out there?
I mean, you certainly can. I'm gonna move you along in a minute, but yeah, if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. So we're not going to be. We will be doing some specific. We will be doing specific playtesting. We've done internal playtesting on certain aspects of the system, and we will continue to do playtesting after the system is prototyped and when we move into the specific mechanics for specific games. But we will also be putting the system up for open development, which means anyone who goes onto our website and reads our blog will be able to read it and interact with one of the Onyx Path team members to complain or laud the mechanics. And yes, it is me. I am the one that they put up in front of you, so you can fire upon me. So,
You will.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But yes.
Yes. So,
Yes.
so that's basically. I mean, that's basically the state of where we are with the projects. Both Scion and the Trinity Continuum have writing work that has already been done on them. That could be done without having the system already finished. But there's a limit to how far you can go with that before you start to say, am I writing myself down this road here that's not going to actually be borne out by how the game is supposed to be played? So we're kind of keep bouncing back and forth on that. Rose, did you want to give us a little bit of an update on Cavaliers? Last year we announced Cavaliers of Mars.
Cavaliers of Mars is my game swashbuckling action on the Red Planet. You can sort of think of it as Mars has canals, therefore Mars must have Venice. It's in development. We've got, I'd say, about half the book written. And it's admittedly gotten shuffled a little bit to the back because I make my living off of World of Darkness games. But we're getting back around to it. And this is a random fact, but might illuminate the game a little bit. This is the first time I think I could ever describe the gear section of a role-playing game as melancholy.
Wistful?
Melancholy, romantic, that kind of thing, in the gear section.
So we had announced Cavaliers of Mars as one of the first things that Onyx Path was able to do as sort of a new sort of game.
And there's already a quick start out there.
And there's a quick start out there. In fact, I think probably done, but there's at least one game amongst the what are they
Yes,
The
this
Gamer
morning the
Society.
Wrecking Crew.
called? The Gamer Society.
Yeah.
Yeah, who are working with the Wrecking Crew to do our various in-play games at the time.
And we got a bunch of playtest notes from that this
Do you?
morning, actually. Yeah.
That's good. Pretty cool. Scarred Lands is again a fantasy setting. It was originally using the Die 20 system that we actually purchased in conjunction with Nocturnal Media. That is a company that was created and owned by the original creator and owner of White Wolf, Stuart Wick. And so we're working together on bringing back the Scarred Lands. Currently, we have a copy of the first adventure for that, Pathfinder compatible. We're not actually locked into saying it will only be Pathfinder. Basically, it was a really easy thing to have the developer who knew Pathfinder work on a Pathfinder thing for Scarred Lands. So if you'd like to check that out, we have a couple of copies of that at the booth. We were not able to get it printed up in time for the con itself. We're actually just talking about how we want to roll that out. One of the things we were waiting on is really to get a better feel for how D&D 5th felt, and so we're getting that now. And sometimes that's really the way you have to do these things. Cavaliers. And finally, I'd like to do a similar thing as we did when we advanced Cavaliers, which is to talk a little bit about some of what could be the next stage of what Onyx Path does, which is new games, and we're very, very pleased to be able to announce something that completely is unlike anything that White Wolf or we had ever done before. And I'll let Mr. Eddy Webb describe to you the amazingness of, and this is serious, we're actually not kidding about this.
Right.
The setting and the game that he's going to be working on. Can I say the name?
Go for it.
It's called Pugmire.
Thank you. Already have a fan. Fantastic. Pugmire is a dog-based fantasy game. It sounds funny, but it's actually the idea is that the age of man has come and gone, and dogs have inherited the earth, and they've been uplifted so that they can carry weapons and armor, and they have built society in man's name. So they have a code of man, like be a good boy and cats are not to be trusted, and they have built a society around this. And so it's kind of a blending of the late 70s, early 80s fantasy where they had some sci-fi elements injected in, like Expedition to Barrier Peak from D&D, those kinds of things. A little bit, tiny bit of Gamma World in there, but really it's the idea of just celebrating what's really, really interesting and cool about fantasy that I think a lot of people kind of got jaded about. It's like, take the elves out, take the dwarves out. This is the kind of the fun, the exploration, the building of things. But there's also some politics. There's some serious questions about religion and morality that these dogs are exploring. But it is also about giant Pyrenees with a sword, vanquishing monsters and being heroic about it. So the idea is that it's a game. It's not a funny game, but it is lighthearted and celebrates cooperation and teams and doing good things in the name of civilization. And it's something that I kicked around initially just as a fun idea. And then when a couple of my dogs passed away, and I realized it's something I really wanted to explore, I talked to some people, and more people like, this is actually a really fun idea, and something that really kind of got a lot of people who got kind of entrenched into what fantasy should be to think about what you can do with fantasy. And
he was a cat fancier.
Cats, fucking them out. And when I talked to Rich about it, one of the things we realized is that White Wolf has always had a fantastic tradition of storytelling games, but it always does kind of skew a little to the dark. And there's nothing really in the Onyx Path repertoire that really covers just kind of a lighthearted and perhaps even a young adult slant towards an IP.
I have to say, just to kind of expand on that point.
Yeah, go for it.
Eddie tells me about this. I'm reading it. This is really, really great. I don't know about publishing it, but I really need to draw some illustrations for this thing of pugs with swords. I mean, they're all different breeds too. I don't want to be racist.
No.
But thinking about it, like, why would I want to publish this? Mm-hmm. There's a certain bit of role playing where we're like, why? It's vampires. Well, if we did vampires as, kind of like, I think as far as wacky as you would get vampires is probably where Joss took it with Buffy, right?
Right.
If you get too wacky with vampires, they're not vampires anymore. The value of having that, what you can explore, the stories are gone. Like doing this sort of these avatars, or they're sort of they're not us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to pretend that a dog walking around with a battle axe, really pissed off because that cat wizard burned his village, is going to be really us. But the things that they do and the things that they feel and why they do those things, we can explore that as players without having to go, oh, but that would never happen in the real world.
Right, exactly.
That's kind of really an interesting thing to
we can explore concepts like nationalism and religion and faith without having to have the baggage of modern day world exploration of things and the context of those. We can pull those away and go, okay, well, you have a tenet of be a good boy. What is a good boy? What does that mean? Why is it a boy and not a girl? Why are those elements enshrined? And what does that say about your civilization and your existence as a cooperation of breeds?
At the same time, if you don't want to go down those paths,
you could beat up stuff with the battle axes and giant Pyrenees.
Or, if you walk around here and look at the sheer number of kids that are here who are now being taught how to role play by their parents, and this is a really nice, understandable place for them to enter the hobby as well. So it's got a lot to go for it, and also get to draw some pugs with crossbows. It's pretty cool.
You question?
I was going to say, I'm sensitive as I were different breeds of dogs, different racial issues. And
yes.
Are the corgis going to be British?
Yes, but unfortunately they're going to be slaves of the Irish Senate.
I'm out. I can but actually, I had a conversation yesterday talking to someone about this, and one of the things I do want to do is, for example, pit bulls are not going to be an aggressive breed. There's going to be rumors that cats have started about how horrible and aggressive they are. Because one of the things that I've talked to some fellow dog activists is like there are these kind of perceptions about dogs. I want to make them more universal. It's like every breed, there's potential for playing any breed. I want to put in rules for like making your own breeds and putting mechanics to those breeds. But they're all going to have their own benefits and flaws and quirks. But I definitely, so there's going to be certain slants towards breeds, again, like the kind of the AKC groupings, like certain dogs are good at certain things versus other things. But I don't want it to be about this breed is better than that breed, but rather, kind of like a traditional fantasy game where this class and this breed maybe works a little better for the kind of character you want to do, but a different breed might work better for a different kind of character. A wiry breed would work really well for a ranger or an archer for distance things, but if you want the kind of hunting elements of it, then maybe you go for a hunting breed. So that's kind of where I want to go with this, is that all breeds are different. And again, it's a bit of a commentary on people and how they see each other. But just from as a dog lover and as an animal lover, I want to kind of show that these are all different breeds and they all have a different place in our lives.
So that's basically what we're up to.
Do I just go full Q&A now?
Q&A. Folks, questions?
I do have a question about the pug thingy.
Fantastic.
Four-legged dogs, or are these like two-legged, they got thumbs?
Well, my daughter asked the same question.
What's that?
How do they hold their sword?
Archery, and I'm trying to visualize
right.
it.
The visual is, we talked about this, the idea is that they're kind of like somewhere between like kind of mouse guards, rats of Nim, Redwall idea, so that they look a lot like animals, but they can stand upright at times, they can manipulate, they have thumbs, but like they can also run on all fours at times and elements. And the backstory is with that basically these were genetically modified animals initially, because like, I want to be able to talk to my pet dog, or the military tries to explore ways of getting, if you could have dogs hunt down people and actually hold weapons as police dogs. And it can possibly go badly, especially when you uplift cats, because that will never go badly. But yeah, and actually, kind of related note, the cats are not necessarily the bad guys. They're just a different faction of nation states that they don't get along with the dogs, but it's much more kind of a political dynamism rather than cats are evil, dogs are good. So they definitely have certain perspectives, because one thing we talked about is that there's no good or evil in this game. It's just different perspectives and different opinions. But yeah, they do carry things, but they do look much more like dogs. They're not completely humanoid.
Right.
Yes.
So what you're saying is we should be prepared for the guide to the Catocracy Fire when that comes out?
I've already had some people ask if they could write that. Yeah, and I don't want to. I mean, I'm starting from a dog perspective, because that's where the idea came from. But I certainly want to bring other animals in. The current idea I have for the cats is they're kind of a blend between the Renaissance Italy city-state model, with a bit of the kind of the Prussian military look and dynamism. So they swear allegiance to different houses, and so different breeds of cats have different areas, and they have a tenuous alliance amongst themselves. They squabble a bit, which is why they haven't really worked together against the dogs. But the dogs are a little too blindly loyal to dogma to be be able to actually work effectively against the cats. Yes?
For the Starlands books, how far has the storyline been advanced from where it was previously left off?
Well, I was talking about that a half hour ago.
Really?
With Scott Holden, who, unless his day job prevents it, will be the developer for Scarlands, working with me and Stuart Wick on actually creating the projects and getting them out there. And Scarlands has an interesting history because there was a fourth edition D&D that was created for Scarlands. I think they got the Creature Collection 4th edition out. But the original plan was to advance it by 100 years. And we were actually questioning that. Like, what do you think? Should we advance it or leave it where it was? Because it is a new thing.
And how the story goes. Like,
right.
Forgotten Realms got advanced for 100 years for 4th edition. And I hated it because all the places that I was invested in.
Right.
Like, here's what it is in the future. Yeah, but you're skipping ahead all this stuff, all the stories that I wanted to play.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that is that was the conversation we were just having, because I think there's value to opening it up if you have a reason to say it's 100 years later and now this has changed and this has changed because of freshness, and why would they now be aligned? Why would they? But
when Dark Horse was
doing
Star Wars comics, jumping ahead 100 years made sense because the Empire is defeated, not really defeated.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's still around. But they gave them a reason that here's how the Sith have come back.
Right.
So in that case, it made a story sense.
Right.
But advance and you don't have to have Luke and Leia and Han running around.
So currently, we actually kind of agreed at lunch that maybe we didn't need to advance the story for this, and that we could revisit Hallowfest as everyone knew it, and things like that. It might change before we get there. So, Alan?
And kind of a similar vein with Aeon, it had a somewhat notoriously dense meta plot.
Yes.
Eddy. So how do you plan to address that going forward? Are we going to build on what they had before?
What meta plot?
Yeah. Thank you.
I like the approach that's been done with the 20th anniversary books, where it's sort of meta plot agnostic. It's a little trickier with the Trinity Continuum because it is multiple eras along the same timeline. But whereas, for example, in the original edition of Aberrant, they had a section saying, okay, there's 30 years left until everything goes to hell, and this is what's going to happen. All of your superheroes, they all go insane and everything dies and everything sucks. I'm not going to address any of that within the context of Aberrant. So while by default Aberrant does lead into Aeon, we're not going to hold you to that. You can play through Aberrant, you can keep on playing your Aberrant games up as far as you want, and I mean, maybe the Aberrant War happens, maybe it doesn't.
Is there value in maybe having multiple explanations, how we got to here? Is there 2 or 3 different ways to do that?
Yes, we have been thinking that.
Okay.
May I jump in?
Sure.
Go for it.
No, basically, one of the things I did for Aeon to address this is okay, well, you've got this. I mean, mostly I'm leaving the past for other people to write about, but what I did was, there's a section at the end of the book of the GM secret section, and part of it is, all right, we've got all these things set up with the chromatics and the coalition arc and stuff, and I just go through what the next 20, 30 years is, the basic things that happen with all that, with the specific descriptions of, this is what happens if the PCs don't do anything. So, if the PCs are all doing stuff with the chromatic war and various other things like that, then this is what happens with the coalition arc, because they're not dealing with it. if they're dealing with the Coalition arc and not the Chromatic War, that's what happens with the Chromatic War. Or if they're, bopping back and forth, then this is just a guideline of what the stuff looks like before the PCs make it completely different.
I think it was, I don't know which of the Mage books it was about the Future Fates idea.
That was done through Dark Ages and
yeah.
I feel
Mage Sorcerer's
Phil
Crusade.
Bucaro is using it now in the new Mage 20 thing to say, here's what could be, but not locking it down, particularly with something like the Trinity Continuum, where we do want somebody to be able to jump into aggro, let's say, and not feel like they've got to end it with the war. If they're having a great time moving through time with the characters, at the same time, people sometimes just like the coolness of saying this is all one setting. And so if we come in here and let's say we have time travel, we could then come in here and it's the same characters could understand what was happening. So it's a little it's less of a narrative novelistic approach and more of a here's a few options approach.
The Continuum itself also has a very unique relationship to time and a unique relationship to the three lines in and of themselves that'll kind of be expounded on in the core book, and it lends a bit more of a weight to those potential future fates.
If people
very far now. But.
If people are familiar with quantum, like real world science, the idea of multiple universes, quantum probabilities, it ties in a lot with that.
Sure.
I'll say this about the question about Aberrant. I mean, not about Aberrant, about Starlands. Any way you guys can get rid of the alliterative names on the map will be a win. The fact that everything alliterates is almost off-putting.
Well, we had Stan Lee do the...
that was the only explanation I could come up with.
Just imagine Stan Lee's Starlands.
A strong true believer.
So 25 years ahead and be like, we've decided to rename the whole continent. That's great.
So,
the Planet Council came in.
It's funny that, when you say that, because I did the original Scarlands map, and I thought the same thing at the time. Where is this? Is BB here, BB there, but one's Blood Bayou and one's what? Okay. Yeah, well, it's a good point. Yeah. Mr. Matt.
With regards to Aberrant, I realize that you still have system work to go, but the taint system in the original game was described in the fiction as being sort of an inevitable process. If you used your powers too much, it would happen. The mechanics did not support that. Is that something that you're looking to really fix, or is that something you diverge from?
The concept of what happening in the fiction, or whatever, descriptor that is not the rules for playing the game, matching with what you can actually do in the game, absolutely is something that we do not want to have the fiction flying off the handle. And basically not being true to what the universe is like, because you know what the rules of the universe are. So we wouldn't do whether taint will be changed or not. That's something we'll face once we actually have the system.
We have actually discussed that. I don't know how much you want me to spoil.
Well, let's see. Since I know we discussed it, because I discussed it, and I didn't.
Okay. So I didn't know how much of that you remembered. That's There's a lot of stuff that you're doing. So
sure.
Also, you're old.
Stop that. So, it isn't that we're trying to hide anything or not bring it up, or just to embarrass Ian. Actually, why?
That's part of it.
But so much can change as we're discussing those things, and in particular, I haven't really put. I know everybody thinks different parts of the whole thing. I haven't really put that all together, and because we've been concentrating on the system and how can we make that work for Aeon. Because of course, Aeon's the first one that's going to come out.
It just seemed like that power corrupts was a real central theme, or was intended to be, but it didn't come through.
And my question is do you have to have taint to get that theme across? Right, like power does.
For some
corrupt.
people, unfortunately, yes.
Right.
Well, if I can jump in for a minute, one of the things we've really, and we being on other lines as well, have kind of embraced is the idea of optional rules as well. Yeah. And actually being able to give the players and the storytellers the ability to fine-tune exactly what elements of their games they really want to hammer home. And I know already in Aeon we were talking about a lot of optional rules for fine-tuning certain aspects of stuff that was in the core book, and certain rules to really play up or play down parts that you wanted.
I mean, one I was talking about was like, whether it's like, well, some people are going to want like combat to be really gritty, and some people sort of cinematic. So just little sidebars, here are your choices.
Or whether Scions can use dramatic editing.
Well, yes, that too.
Which is a big thing.
Yes.
So that's an optional thing that you can fine tune if you want, or you might not have to, but we tell you how to do it. So for something like Taint, yeah.
So I mean, one of the things, and again, it's a bigger picture thing. Taint is an aspect that is very unique to an Aberrant's look at superheroes, right? I mean, we do not have Batman going, my arm's getting huge because I punched that guy too hard. So if what I really want to see, Trinity is always, and Aeon have always done it right, where we have the multiple possible ways that you could enjoy the space opera to science fiction genres within the setting itself. Aberrant kind of did the whole cult of personality thing as its main thing. What would happen to normal people if they got these powers? Well, some would run for president, some would become mercenaries, and some would go in the wrestling federation. Yeah, but there would be entire channels devoted to these folks and things like that. That really is just one sliver of how you can handle that superhero genre, and one of the things I want to see is us expanding that so you have options in there. If you want to play a Grim Knight Avenger in the Knights of Gotham, not Gotham, not anything copyrighted, in Philadelphia, which is like Gotham, except worse. So,
the Gothic Knight was one of the
so you wanted to have an entire town. Like Top 10 or Astro City or something like that, into that kind of storytelling. What we're looking at now is to take what it already did well and expand out to allow that. Adventure, in a similar way, to have other options for the kinds of pulp stories that were told during that time. All the way in the back.
So, you mentioned that this new system is going to be used across the multiple Continuum games and Scion. And this ties to the idea of the taint being some of the things. The games not only have varying themes in terms of how they approach your ability to use powers. How is the core system going to adjust itself to the difference of being an actual honest-to-God God and being Dr. Mesmero from the center of the Earth, so that the mechanics don't swing too widely one way or the other?
Okay, the question was about scale. How is it going to handle it?
Tied to the themes of it.
Tied to the themes. Very well.
Next question. I can answer a little bit of that.
Well, we talked about it.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday, in fact. The core resolution mechanic of the game always remains the same. It's going to be a variant of attribute plus ability, like many of the other White Wolf games we have all come to love.
Dice pool systems.
Yeah.
Dice pool systems, yeah. Okay.
D10s.
Yes, D10s are used. The actual what that's actually representing, and the actual thing that's representing changes depending on who you are and what you are within the world. And we have I think 4 different mechanisms, 3 of which are unique to the character, and one of which is environmental and can be used is used in Scion and can be used for, I think, Aberrants and possibly Scion or
Aeon.
in Aeon. Yeah.
One of the things the system does is replicate the experience of the Batman, where Batman in his own comics is much lower powered than Batman in the JLA. And the system even handles that through the environmental factor that Neil's talking about. The system has a way to measure the scale of a story, and your character will slide around inside it.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the same character can change scale depending on environmental factors.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you mentioned that this system would be released in open dev, so we would be able to get a look at it and give you some feedback on it. Do you have any idea of when that would happen? This year, next year?
If it doesn't happen this year, I think Rich is going to kill me.
Yeah. Oh, don't think.
Yes.
She's one of your friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't even think what I'm going to do.
But yes, my personal goal is very soon, and almost certainly before the end of the year.
One of the things we don't want to throw it out until we're confident that we know how to answer the questions that folks will have when they examine it. There's going to be some things that are going to catch us flat-footed anyway, for sure. But it's really rough to do. Okay, we got it this close, so let's just let everybody look at it. And instead of saying, no, let's run through a couple internal things.
Yes, we don't want you to finish the system for us, sort of thing. Right.
Speaking of that, how did this may be a sore subject, but how did the Exalted leak, which I only know tangentially about because of Facebook, how did that affect the development? Was that a bad deal, or was that a...
So the development of Exalted it's so much a contained box of the developers working on this thing that by the time the leak was happening, the things they were working on that were leaked, they'd already made those kind of decisions. So as far as I know, and all my communication with Holden, and Holden kind of speaks for the development crew, they did not change a damn thing that they were doing.
Okay, because I follow Holden on Facebook, and when it happened, he just freaked out.
Oh yeah,
and I'm sure he was upset and angry. And
I think some of that was more personal, that they felt more betrayed than it screwed anything up.
Okay. Part of that was what Richard touched on. They had already worked and revised and play tested some of those elements, so the information that was outdated. So
and they felt made them look bad because they saw had a problem.
People reading that document didn't have accurate information, so they're making judgment calls based on information that's outdated. So it put some pressure on the team, but they've managed to move forward.
Okay.
But again, it was more like, oh God, now how are we going to do the next play test so that this doesn't happen, rather than, oh, we've got to change this thing. Especially not, oh, somebody now knows something, and we better change it so that it's a surprise again. They're very dedicated to what they're creating. So.
I had a question for all the lines on a fiction level.
Sure.
I think with the original Trinity Aeon line, we were supposed to get an Aeon anthology, and I don't think we ever actually did.
Did we break a promise to you?
We didn't.
We never do that.
I think it just. But I was just wondering.
So yeah, I mean, I think one of the goals back then, by getting Effinger involved and everything, is it was going to be a continuing sort of thing. And then, if I recall correctly, he became very sick.
Oh yeah.
I was no longer able to work.
I didn't know that.
So they were actually, he wanted to do it and couldn't. So it was like, oh, we got this great thing, and we're going to do some of the initial stuff, and isn't it awesome? But then, and at that point, the effort was kind of put into, well, let's, instead of putting out the fiction thing where we can't have as much as we thought it was going to do, let's get another set of adventures going so people can enjoy it that way.
I was just wondering though, with all the new IPs and stuff coming out, how is that going to work? Is it going to be only a Kickstarter based if we have fiction, if it's gotten to this level for Kickstarter, or are we going to have a separate, there are books if there are interest, if you buy them.
There are people on the team pressuring Rich to put out more fiction.
In the current setup, the way it is, we're not at a stage where we're working on anything but, like, again, just the system right now, right? So getting set up for fiction and things like that isn't something we'd be doing. The World of Darkness and Exalted, because they're set up as part of a license deal, I have less leeway to maneuver with those things for fiction. The Kickstarter was perfect because I didn't have to worry about how can you get this into stores in any way, shape, or form, or on Amazon or whatever, what's the Barnes & Noble one? Nook, or anything like that, because the Kickstarter would provide us the financing to be able to do that. So however it's received, people who really love, like, say, vampire fiction, will get something new. I thought that was kind of cool. I'm pretty sure, and it's always been in my conception, that Trinity and Scion would definitely have fiction. Some whether we make it all ebook sort of stuff, or whether we actually get it printed and go forth from there beyond our friends at drive-thru. So, yeah, I hope we do even more than that.
We're running low on time, so we about have one more question.
Oh, one more question, Alan. Do you mind if I call
Go.
you?
I'll just ask you in a bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys dealt with a lot of alternate gods, or even the different
Pantheons
and stuff, like the Scion and everything like that, and even the nationalistic deities like John Bull and Uncle Sam and whatnot. But there was no core mechanic to like create your own, or like if you wanted to have Coyote, or maybe a remnant of him, or let's just say like Neil Gaiman, the Man, or the God of TV, and things like that.
Right. So we've actually discussed this a lot. When I first greenlit and conceptualized Scion back in the day, I actually saw it as bigger than a mythological replication system. One of the great things about Scion is you get to delve into mythology, which pretty much anybody who's involved in role-playing games probably were really turned on to that when they were younger, in some way or another. But exactly what you were saying about what else could you do with this kind of idea?
Is there a mechanic for that?
Well, to begin with, Joe Carricker is very devoted to the idea that he will allow people to figure out how, give them the ability to create their own pantheons. But the core itself is going to be focused on what we call the value proposition, right, of playing the children of gods, but not close the door to, and in fact encourage you to explore other ways. Like I was tormenting someone who really believes we should only do the gods, and I said, well, I want to do the Scions and the Transformers. How would you do that? How would you do that? They're Iker. What? I said, it'd be motor oil. So it's just to sort of expand it. Really, what we'll do is we're going to expand it, give the options to tell different kinds of stories, while still enabling the original way that you would tell a Scion story to still be completely valid and beautiful. So we don't want to cut any of that stuff off. But yeah, you'll have the information you need to go off and do anything you need to do. That's pretty much about it, folks. We have another panel in here for the Classic World of Darkness. Then we'll be down at our booth if you want to continue any of these conversations or ask us more questions. 1103 down in.